DevCon finished up around the 8th, I think, of July. And they were talking about, they being Marta Lewandowski, was talking about a new approach to booting on Linux called Nimble, or No More BootLoader. And during that conference, she talked about being able to speed things up, boot the operating system directly without going through Grub or Lilo or system deboot, any of those things. Just forget all that. Let's just go straight into the kernel. And then she invited feedback. So this is not bagging on what they're trying to do. It's just my thoughts on where bootloaders came from and correcting one little mistake that she made about, and it's common. Most people today don't really understand what bootstrapping is. She referred to the time old one of pulling oneself up by the bootstraps, which is impossible. Yeah, that can be, that's partially correct, but that's not what bootstrap really means. So let's dive in for a minute and let me explain what bootstrapping is, where it came from, how it got started, and then I'll talk a little bit about some of the advantages I think that bootstrapping has and why we might want to preserve it. So these are just my opinions. Again, as always, I welcome yours in the comments below. So let's get started. I'm DJ Ware, and this is the Cyber Gizmo. So let's roll the clock back all the way back to when hardware was being developed brand new each time. So a company like, let's say, Burroughs or CDC or even IBM would generally bet the farm on the next generation of computer systems they would build. Now, of course, these are mainframes. Some of them were smaller mainframes. Some of them were huge, absolutely monstrous mainframes that would fill, rooms full of electrical equipment in order to create an environment for what they then called data processing. Let's talk about how things actually got started. So you might envision a group of hardware engineers that are sitting around a table. They're studying blueprints and schematics are spread out before them. These are probably existing machines, and what they're looking for here are ideas to help improve on the old design of the machines previous, based on what they had learned since that machine was designed and today. So, there was a lot of conversation. There was a lot of energy. Most of these guys were pretty young. At Burroughs, the software engineers would be sitting at the table with them. But in a lot of companies, hardware did everything, and then they just sort of pushed it over the wall to the software people to try to do things with. Now, Burroughs had a little bit different approach to that because they saw that, no, that's not going to work. You still, hardware doesn't do anything without software. It's just a paperweight. This was a high stakes endeavor. They have to balance between performance goals and the practicalities of cost. Also, could this thing even be made? Do we have the facilities to even build this thing? So once they had all that done, they would then say, okay, we can't start building this yet. We need to get a budget. They still needed to provide a proposal to the management team of, okay, this is what we're going to do. This is our hardware and software costs combined. And the CEO, the CFO, and other key stakeholders would then go over those plans and scrutinize them, because the amount of money that they were going to invest is basically betting the company. It took a lot of times the entire profit from the sale of the last machine to build the next machine. Okay, so the hardware people would go, they got their funding, they would start building the hardware. And at some point, the software people would get involved in actually bootstrapping the machine. Now, what RedHat is proposing here, Nimble, is not new. There's very few new ideas in the world, and being able to boot straight into the operating system is as old as computers are. That, in fact, that's the way we did things back in the old days. You booted straight into the operating system. Well, there were some problems with that we're going to talk about. So what do we mean by bootstrapping? We shorten it today to call it boot, but it's actually bootstrap is the proper word to use. Now, you don't have to use bootstrap. Boot is fine. Everybody will understand what you mean. What does the software people have to do? What's the first thing when they received new hardware they had to do? Remember, there was nothing. They didn't have cross compilers. These machines probably used a completely different machine language than the previous generation. So you can't borrow any code from there. That's not going to help. And so what did you do? Well, the very first thing you had to have on the machine was an assembler or a compiler. Now, what they would do is they would load a very primitive, very simplified compiler because they had to do it one instruction at a time. There was buttons and panels on the front of the machine. They would flip switches to represent the machine language of the instruction of that compiler. So they basically had to take their primitive compiler and hand encode it into machine language so that they could start funneling into this machine one instruction at a time. Yeah, it was painstaking. It was prone to error. So anyway, once they had all that constructed, they would then write it out to either a punch card or to paper tape so that they had that compiler they could load easily the next time they power cycled the machine. So, and that was the compiler that was used to construct the development environment for that machine. That included the full-blown compiler, the linker, the optimizers, the debugging tools, all of those things were done at this point. So once they had that, then they could start working on the operating system once they had their development environment set up. But remember, the operating system that they initially loaded into this machine would be a single user. But before there were bootloaders, they quickly found out that it was really difficult to diagnose issues that they ran up against. So let's say I go straight from turning on the machine to booting into the operating system, and then things start failing. Well, at this point, I don't have anything I can use and trust to be able to diagnose what happened. I can't run a trace because the operating system isn't working correctly. I can't determine if there's a hardware failure because maybe the hardware that I need is the piece that I need to debug the system. So they really needed something that was smaller that they could preload and that would run diagnostic checks on all of the different subsystems of the computer, whether it be the CPU, check out the memory, looking at the channels that move data from memory out to the different peripherals, checking out individual peripherals like card readers, card punches, printers, tape drives, disk drives, maybe external communications, serial communications would be most common back then. So they needed to have some way they could check all that out and being able to do that. One of the things I remember about Sun way back in the days of the Sunfire machines, this would be like the V880, V890 series of machines and above and up. So these machines would actually have a full-blown diagnostic environment that was part of their bootloader. Without that, there would be hours of painstaking guessing. Oh, it might be this. No, it's not that. It must be this. Oh, it's not that. You can see that would take hours. That was one of the reasons why the bootloaders came about. But, there are other reasons that you want to use besides troubleshooting that you want to use a bootloader for. Let's say that you're doing experiments with, like I do, you do experiments with the operating system, and maybe you're slotting in new code, or maybe you're writing a device driver for the first time. Well, if something goes wrong in the kernel, and especially on Linux, guess what? black screen of death. There is no forgiveness in the system mode. If it's an application that's running in user space, that's fine. The application crashed, but the machine is still up. I can go and debug the application until I figure out what part of it is dying. The other important area is these immutable operating systems like Core OS from Fedora or any of the immutable ones that rely on versioning the bootloader. So let's take Silverblue for example. Silverblue uses RPM OS tree on the front end as the mechanism to install packages into the operating system, but on the back end, it uses OS tree in order to actually manage the construction of the operating environment so that you're not writing into the current one, you're writing into the future one. What happens is it will then point to the latest. Once you reboot, you pick up that latest environment and you're running on that. But if something goes wrong, you have a chance at the grub menu to roll it back to the previous release that was working. So that's another reason why you might want this, is that if you're running in an immutable environment, then you're going to need that kind of capability. We haven't talked about this, but there's another one, which is the bootloaders abstract the boot process for different hardware architectures. What are you talking about? Well, an x86 has a specific order of things that it does to boot. ARM has a different set of steps that it uses to boot. PowerPC has a different set altogether of steps that it uses to boot. So the bootloader abstracts all of those and allows those three different, you can have more. I'm just using those as the three. So you can have more, but you have an abstraction that allows one grub application to handle multiple hardware architectures. And the only thing different about that particular grub is it's compiled for ARM or compiled for PowerPC or compiled for x86, 64-bit. So, I mean, those are just some of the things that I think if you don't have those, you're going to have to load them into the kernel. Well, all of a sudden now your kernel is going to have specificity. Like we do kernels for x86, we do kernels for ARM, we do kernels for PowerPC. These are just some things that I think that they should consider. Now, granted, Nimble, the way I understood the presentation from Marta was she said this was for virtual machines at present, which is fine. But just remember, virtual machines still, you have a console that's attached to the host OS. So presumably the host OS is working. The idea behind bootloading it wasn't just, oh, hey, I think we need to put some unnecessary code in the middle of the boot process and slow everything down. No, nobody thought that way. The idea was we needed something in front in order to abstract the boot, in order to troubleshoot the boot, in order to install new kernels into the boot. And we didn't have immutability, but now we do. And so now that's part of the boot process as well, for some of them, not all, but some of them. In closing, I think that it's important we maintain bootloaders because those ensure the safety and reliability of our most critical systems. And so with that, I hope to see you all in the next video, and bye for now.